Well, today the Religious Liberty Commission is holding a hearing, and this is just bringing together commissioners to review the findings from prior sessions and to discuss the current state of religious liberty, they say, in the United States. So participants for this include Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Looks like Dr. Ben Carson will be there. Dr. Phil will also be there, among other religious and public figures that'll be there as well. So this hearing will include a review of testimony that's been gathered throughout the commission's work. Scheduled speakers include a civil rights leader, including 1960s lunch counter sit-ins, along with scholars from a range of backgrounds. Let's take a listen.
I appear before you as an attorney and law professor at a public university who entered the profession due to my strong interest in and really a devotion to the cause of religion's flourishing and freedom in the U.S. I speak from a perspective after 42 years of practice, study, and scholarship of pride in the United States' continuing pursuit of religious freedom, even as we have, of course, stumbled from time to time. In fact, likely pride isn't a strong enough word. I should rather say that I'm often moved by the beauty of our founding and continuing commitment, a commitment still visible in our nation's life, not only in law, but in interactions between neighbors and in towns and cities in the U.S. Even as the news will always be drawn to stories of conflict, there is in fact far more peace among the many religions represented here, large and small, thanks in significant part to the manner in which our legal guarantees of religious freedom have shaped our culture. Sometimes there's even more. There's mutual appreciation and even cooperation between religions and between religions and the state. Though always unsettling, church-state friction is the exception, not the rule. This is an objective good for our nation, and yes, also beautiful. I've followed the work of this commission, its gathering of a wide array of personal testimonies, and the thinking of scholars and religious leaders. These have provided you exposure to the sweep of relevant history and law, to the positive roles religion has played in our society, and to both the 10,000-foot view and the view from the ground, which has been particularly interesting, by which I mean from the minds and hearts and souls of particular Americans of many religions who have benefited from religious freedom or have suffered from a governmental misunderstanding of religious freedom's scope. From time to time, this suffering is the result of malice, and recently from governmental preoccupation with sexual expression. Quite often, however, it arises from a misunderstanding of that unfortunate, historically and culturally inaccurate, and constitutionally inapposite Jeffersonian phrase, separation of church and state. In some, religious freedom is a beautiful ideal, but this commission has undertaken the laborious and concrete work required to keep ideals like this aloft. In the next 10 minutes or so, then, allow me to highlight a few themes and issues that I hope the commission will take into consideration as you complete your report. These concern, first, recognizing the positive consequences of religious freedom, including some that I propose to be worthy of particular attention because of their timeliness, and those that I would propose to be crucially, I would say architecturally related to the ongoing success of this experiment in freedom that is our country. Second, and more briefly, I'll address and characterize the negative consequences of the misunderstanding of our constitutional guarantee of non-establishment. And third, I will note the due limits of religious freedom. Excuse me. First, then, even a quick tour of U.S. history can reveal the positive contributions of religion and religious freedom. But today, we also have empirical evidence at our disposal. We can better quantify religion's contributions to, for example, the rich tapestry of educational, healthcare, and social services institutions in the U.S., often serving the most vulnerable. Religious Americans' volunteer hours, their charitable dollars, supporting their neighbors of every religion or none. Because of my experience as a family law scholar, too, I would like to highlight religion's contributions to strengthening the bedrock of American society, which is the family. Almost 200 years ago, Alexis de Tocqueville observed that the strength of America's families, particularly by way of their transmitting their faiths, importantly grounded our democracy. We can confidently say that de Tocqueville was right. We know today that the family in the U.S. is suffering, especially among the poorest, and that those communities then reap the consequences. We have less marriage, a large percentage of children missing the stable presence of their parents. The sexual objectification of women, and increasingly of men, is common. We're also witnessing high rates of non-marital cohabitation, abortion, divorce. Because children of the poor and those with less educational privilege disproportionately experience these losses, they also suffer the related negative outcomes in the realms of education, employment, income, and future family formation themselves. This in turn leads to the widening and hardening of gaps between the haves and the have-nots in a country that has prided itself upon social mobility. But many religions in the U.S. are devoted to forming and sustaining strong families, with precepts, programs, and charities empirically associated with good family outcomes. Some highlight the importance of respecting the link between sexual love and new life, or adults' obligations to put children's needs before their own. Some stress healthy dating practices, offer marriage preparation, marriage mentoring, family crisis interventions, support for single and impoverished parents and for the divorced and widowed, help for new parents, and many more services. In recent years, more than a few lawmakers proceeded on the opposite assumption. That is, that religion, sexual, and family mores were socially harmful, and thus should be legally silenced. On this assumption and their own attachment to opposing principles, they trampled religious freedom. This is certainly ironic, given what we now know empirically about the positive outcomes of religious ways of doing courtship, marriage, and parenting. But happily, it's also increasingly facing legal headwinds as a series of U.S. Supreme Court and lower court opinions vindicate the free speech, associational, church autonomy, and religious freedom rights of religious institutions and individuals seeking to live their family beliefs with integrity. Family is the place where children can learn to love themselves and others, to respect a wide array of differences between people of all ages, conditions, traits, and abilities, to develop capacities for sacrifice, generosity, and justice, all indispensable skills for living in our pluralistic, democratic society. This point further counsels respectful deference by the state to parents' decision-making regarding their children's religious upbringing. It's worth taking a moment, in fact, to celebrate the Supreme Court, and now many lower courts also, recent and welcome articulation of the necessity of constitutional deference to parents, especially by way of the Mahmoud opinion. It had always bordered on the absurd to suggest that teachers with no long-run connections with or responsibility for other people's children could contradict parents' faith transmission. Finally, today, cause for celebration, the constitutional law on this matter is clearly articulated. In fact, religions can be among the government's greatest partners and allies in fostering the ideals and values that our public institutions, including public schools, hope to instill. Our Supreme Court noted this in a case involving Amish parents' rights to homeschool their children, Wisconsin versus Yoder, where it pointed out that the exact value that the mandatory education law was supposed to instill, adult self-sufficiently, was perhaps most admirably cultivated by Amish homeschooling practices. This was also noted in a 1996 federal district court case in Nebraska, which struck down a state law requirement that freshmen at a public university must live in state, not religiously organized housing. In its opinion accommodating religious freedom, the court emphasized that the exact values the state sought to promote, pluralistic interaction and mutual interpersonal acceptance among a diverse array of students, would likely better be accomplished in the religious housing, which included a more diverse...
We've been hearing there from Professor Helen Alvarez. Looks like she's from George Mason University, and this is all about the future of religious freedom here in the U.S. So some interesting findings there from the commission.